Good afternoon and welcome to Sedgemoor District Council's Audit and Standards Committee meeting. I will now hand over to the committee manager, Mr. Taylor.
Good afternoon, members. Just to advise you that this meeting is being recorded and a copy will be available on the council's YouTube website in the next couple of days. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I now ask each committee member and officer who is taking part in the meeting to introduce themselves and confirm that they can see and hear me before we start the official business of this committee. Councillor Will Human.
Councillor Will Human for Mark and Wedmore wards, and I'm here. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Councillor Nick Bayliss. Okay, moving on. Councillor Hilary Bruce.
Hilary Bruce, representing Bridgewater Fairfax ward. I can hear and see everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ian Dyer. Councillor Mike Facey.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chairman. Councillor Mike Facey, Bermondsey North. I can hear you and see you perfectly. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Liz Levy.
We have apologies from Councillor Liz Levy.
Thank you. Councillor Rachel Lilly.
Good afternoon, councillors. It's Rachel Lilly here from the Wyndham ward. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Councillor Alan Matthews.
Good afternoon. It's Alan Matthews, councillor for Burnham and Highbridge, Burnham Marine and Highbridge, and I can see and hear everything.
Thank you very much. Councillor Liz Mathley. Sorry, Lisa Mathley. Sorry.
Hi,
Lisa.
Mathley, Cheddar and Shipham. I can see and hear everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Diego Rodriguez. I can never say your name, Diego. Sorry about that.
That's right. Councillor Diego Rodriguez, Bridgewater Dunware, and yes, I can hear and see everything. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry. Councillor, I've got the Parish Council representative, Julian Taylor. Julian Taylor. I know he's here, but I'll come back to him. Independent persons, Veronica Horman.
I am here.
Oh, that's Julian saying I'm here. Yes, Veronica Horman, independent person. I can see and hear everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Veronica. And Jeff Lewis.
We don't appear to have Mr. Lewis on the line, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you very much. And officers present, is it Mrs. Wellman?
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman and members. I can confirm that I can see and hear everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Steve Taylor.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Steve Taylor, Committee Manager, and I can confirm I can see and hear everything. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just go back and see if Nick Bayliss joined the meeting. No.
Doesn't appear so.
And Ian Dyer?
Likewise, it doesn't appear that way.
No. Okay, thank you very much for that, members. So we'll now move on to the agenda. Item number 1, apologies for absence. I know we've got Liz Levy. Is there anyone else that's given apologies? Steve, is that the only apologies we've got?
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 2, I'm looking for the minutes to confirm that the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on, just have a look at the dates. There's 30th of July and the 19th of October to be a correct record. Can I have a proposer and seconder, please?
Happy to propose, Will Human.
Thank you. And Councillor Rachel Lilly. Thank you, seconder.
Thank you.
Is anybody against, not for this or abstaining? So we can take that as read.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Is there any urgent business?
No, Chairman.
Anyone registered to speak?
Nobody is registered to speak, Chairman.
Okay. Members, have anyone got declarations of interest on any of the items on the agenda this afternoon? Okay. I'll now hand over to Melanie Wellman to start on agenda item number 6, Officers Register of Interest.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, members, this is the usual report that I bring to you on an annual basis, just to confirm that all employees across the organisation have completed a declaration of interest form as they're required to do. Despite the pandemic, I'm pleased to say that of the 400, approximately 400 staff that we have, all staff have completed their forms, other than those that are on long-term sick leave. We've had no issues. The process now is very much that we issue the forms to the PAs in each directorate, and they are then responsible for collating the forms within their own directorates and sending them back to us. And that process is going really, really well, and the forms are being returned within a relatively short space of time. We're having very few queries in terms of completing the form, so I'm very comfortable that people now know what they do and don't need to declare. And we also have the situation that if there is anything that they declare, the assistant director needs to indicate what special measures need to be put in place where there is a potential conflict. And again, all of that is being completed when it's returned to me. So I'm very comfortable that the process is working well. The only thing that I'm not sure about is whether members of staff are always completing updated forms within the year, so in between. So what I'll do is send another reminder out in bits and pieces, just reminding staff that if they do have a change in circumstances, that they need to update their form and fill in a new one. But other than that, all working really positively. I've outlined in the report the types of interest that we have declared. Usually it's relating to either they're working with a member of their family somewhere within the organisation, planning applications that by someone that's known to them, and financial and business interests. But as I say, we've got a good process in place that if there is any potential conflict, that the assistant directors put measures in place to make sure that no conflict can arise. Happy to answer any questions that any members have. Thank you.
Are there any questions, members? Okay, so all we need to do on this one is to note the contents of the report.
Yes, please, Chairman.
So if we can now then move on to agenda item number 7, Members' Code of Conduct.
Thank you. Bear with me as I just open the report, if I may, please. So this report is basically following recommendations that we've had to review our code of conduct, which has come out of the Committee on Standards in Public Life. Oh, sorry, I've just got interrupted with a cup of coffee being brought to me. I do apologise, Chairman. So basically, the Committee on Standards in Public Life carried out a review of standards and best practice generally and made some recommendations which are outlined in Appendix A to your report. We've also received some correspondence asking us to indicate whether we've implemented those best practice recommendations. And if you bear with me, I'll just open up what we've sent back. Basically, we were asked whether we have prohibitions on bullying and harassment in our code of conduct, and definitions of those terms as well. So I've responded on the basis that we already include a prohibition on bullying and a definition of what bullying is in our code of conduct, but that we are reviewing the code and we will consider the need to include harassment within our revised declaration of code of conduct policy. We've also been asked whether we have a provision in our code of conduct requiring councillors to comply with any formal standards investigation and also prohibiting trivial or malicious allegations by councillors. Again, some of that we already include. So we have a provision, we have a provision in relation to not interfering with witnesses to a code of conduct investigation, but we don't have anything in there about complying with any formal standards investigation, and nor do we have anything about trivial or malicious allegations. So again, I think that's something that we need to consider as an authority as to whether we should include that in our code. They've also recommended that we review our code of conduct each year and also seek the views of the public, community organisations and neighbouring authorities in relation to our code of conduct. Whilst we review our code of conduct every 3 years, so on a regular basis, we don't review it annually and we don't go out and consult on it. So again, that's something that I believe we need to consider in our review of the code of conduct. They've also asked whether we keep our code of conduct accessible to members and to the public, and whether we have a copy available in council premises. Well, we do have a copy readily available on the website, and a copy is available to anybody coming into reception if they so wish. But clearly, at the moment, with reception closed, that's clearly not in place. They've also recommended that we update our gifts and hospitality register at least once per quarter. Well, ours is regularly updated, and if you recall, you receive a 6-monthly update on that gifts and hospitality register. But in addition to that, they've asked us to consider publishing the gifts and hospitality in an accessible format, such as a CSV file. So again, whilst we obviously publish our gifts and hospitality, and that is available on our website, I'm not convinced that that is available in a CSV file. So again, that's something that I consider that we need to review. They've also suggested that we need to apply a public interest test against which allegations will be filtered. And whilst we have criteria, I think we need to review that. They've recommended we have at least 2 independent persons, which as a local authority, we've always had 2 independent persons, so we're fully complying with that. They've also recommended that the independent person should be consulted as to whether to undertake a formal investigation and to be given the opportunity to comment on allegations where we're minded to dismiss a complaint as being without merit, vexatious or trivial. Again, we're fully in compliance with that recommendation. They've also recommended that a decision notice goes on the website if we do find somebody to be in breach of the code of conduct. Whilst we haven't found anybody in breach for a number of years, we certainly do make any decision notice available on the website, so we're fully compliant with that. Bear with me, I'm just going through the remainder of them. They're also talking about, interestingly, about where there is conduct of a parish councillor, they are recommending that complaints about a parish councillor should not be made by a clerk, and that those should be made by the parish council as a whole, and only the clerk should make a complaint in all but exceptional circumstances. So that's quite an interesting one, because we've had both scenarios. We've had complaints by clerks, but we've mainly had complaints by parish councils. So that's something that we will obviously need to consider and liaise with towns and parishes about. So that's the vast majority of them. So we were asked to go back and indicate whether we'd adopted all of these by the end of November. We've responded on the basis that I was bringing in a report to you this afternoon, and that I would be inviting you to set up a working group to consider those recommendations and the recommendations of Committee on Standards in Public Life generally, so that we can then decide whether to make changes to the Code of Conduct. I've also mentioned in the report the fact that they are also reviewing the Code of Conduct, and in between writing this report and today, we've actually received formal notification of the new code of conduct that they are recommending that all councils adopt. So I think this is really good timing that we can obviously consider both the recommendations and the new model code of conduct that they're recommending all at the same time, because clearly I was reluctant that we would be looking to review our code of conduct twice. It makes sense that we would look at all of it in one go. So it's tied in very nicely with the timing of this committee. So basically, members, what I'm recommending is if we could set up a working group of say 5 or 6 members, including the independent persons, to basically have a look at the recommendations and the new code. We can then bring some recommendations back to this committee and perhaps have a special meeting to go through it in some detail, with a view to potentially making some recommendations to full council for a revised code of conduct. Happy to answer any questions that any members have on any of that content. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions, members? Okay. With regard to setting up the committee, I propose that we have a member from each party, i.e. the Liberals, the Labour and the Conservatives. Have I got any anyone that would like to volunteer to go on this committee? Please don't all speak at once. Diego.
Will Human is volunteering, but happy if Diego wants to go on it instead. You want to go on it, Diego?
I'm happy to go if no one else chooses to. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you. What about for? Sorry.
Chairman, apologies. My text messages doesn't seem to be working on Teams, but I'm happy to do it for the Labour group.
Thank you, Hilary. And I'm looking for someone from the Liberal Democrats, please.
So I will just say that, you know, Nick has sent his apologies. He's very busy at work today. And I work full time as well. So I'd be happy to do it if the meetings could be in the evening.
We can certainly have a look at that. Yeah, absolutely.
If you
Not a
could,
problem.
thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. So, Veronica, sorry, you're on mute. No, you're still muted.
Sorry. Am I?
Yeah, you're all right now. I can hear you.
Oh, right, lovely. Now, as an independent person, I gather I'm on the committee. But if they're in the evening, can I ask, will they still be on Zoom?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Then that's no problem, whatever time.
Okay.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
So, have you got enough members?
I have. Thank you very much, Chairman.
And should we include the Vice Chairman as well, so that we go up to 6, just in case one of us can't attend?
That would be lovely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for those that have volunteered. So we'll now move on to agenda item number 8, amendment to the Constitution. Over to Mrs. Wellman.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, bear with me while I'm just opening my report. Thank you. So this report is basically recommending 2 changes to the Constitution. The first is in relation to making minor amendments to policies and strategies. So at the moment, officers do not have delegated authority to make any changes to policies or strategies that have to come through either to the executive or to council, or indeed to any of the committees. We are continuously having the situation whereby legislation is changing or best practice is changing, and we need to make relatively minor changes, but are clearly unable to do so without bringing through a report to members. And what this report is therefore seeking is authority to make minor or insignificant changes to policies and strategies, so that we don't have to bring unimportant changes or changes that we're required by legislation to make in any event through to members. We would rather that members were obviously considering the more complex matters where clearly you've got more discretion and more ability. If it's a change in legislation, there's usually no discretion whatsoever, and therefore, you know, the changes have to be made. So that's the first change that I'm seeking approval of. The second change is in relation to the virtual meeting legislation. So legislation came into force on the 4th of April. The Local Authority and Police and Crime Panel Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authority and Police and Crime Panel Meetings regulations. And those regulations remain in force until 7th of May next year and enable us to carry out all of our meetings you know, by virtual means, which is obviously the route that we've gone down since those changes came into place. At the moment, the Constitution doesn't reflect that legislation, and I'm therefore seeking authority to amend the Constitution in consultation with the leader of Council, so that that can be reflected, and therefore anybody that's looking at the Constitution will see the up-to-date rules. That is basically it, Chairman, but happy to answer questions on any of that.
Are there any questions, members? Yes, Councillor Bruce.
It was just really to ask about when minor changes are made to policies, how would we be notified of those changes? Will there be some sort of track or system to see what's been changed?
It's difficult because, as you can imagine, as a local authority, we have literally hundreds of policies and strategies. So members aren't going to want to know about every one. We obviously have our own internal decision-making sort of records that we would keep. But if there were changes to policies or strategies that we felt that members should be made aware of, then we would certainly obviously update you through the members bulletin. So we certainly would make you aware, but I think it would be wrong of me to promise that we would update you on every one, because some of them would be so minor, and you know, there are so many that I don't think that would be appropriate. But obviously, if it was something that members needed to be aware of, we would absolutely be making you aware of those.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Methley, please.
Thank you. I was just wondering about the recommendation to change to amend the Constitution regarding the remote meetings.
Yep.
And is the plan there to change the Constitution so that remote meetings can be done whenever it is legal to do so?
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, if after the 7th of May they don't, you know, lengthen the legislation, or they don't, you know, it doesn't remain in force, then clearly we would go back to the original, you know, the wording in the Constitution. But I will make sure that it does cover the provision if that legislation is extended or new legislation put in place, because I am hopeful, but I don't know. I would be hopeful that the government, seeing that, you know, having virtual meetings can actually encourage more people to take part in council meetings, will enable us to carry on and have both options available to us. So I am keeping my fingers crossed that that will be something that is extended and that we will be able to do in the future. But I'll make sure I cover both eventualities in the wording.
Excellent, thank you.
Are there any more questions, members? Okay, so we need to vote on this. We have to recommend to councils items number 1 and 2. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Bethley. And Councillor Human, are you going to second that?
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
Thank you. Have we got anybody against this motion? Anybody wishing to abstain? So I can take it that we're all in favour of it.
That's right, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we'll move on to item number 9, an annual update on the use of the RIPA powers.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Again, this is a report that I bring to you on an annual basis, updating you on the authorisations that we've granted for covert surveillance. As is often the case with this report, we have not granted any authorisations because the council very, very rarely carries out any form of covert human intelligence or directed surveillance. And the reason for that is that we are able, through the resources that we have, to do most investigations in an overt way without needing to resort to covert tactics. So, for example, if we have a noise nuisance case, we will make the individuals who are alleged to have created the noise aware that we will be putting in noise monitoring equipment. So we make it an overt process rather than one that, you know, is covert. So so in the probably about the last 10-12 years that we've been reporting to the Standards Committee on this issue, we've only had one occasion where we have needed to use the Regulation of Investigatory Powers legislation to enable us to carry out an investigation. We do have a review every 3 years, an audit of our processes that we have in place, because even though we rarely carry out surveillance, we are regularly reviewed, because actually it can be a disadvantage that you rarely do it, because it can mean that when you come to do it, that maybe staff are not kept up to date and don't know how to do it correctly, because it is a very, very rigorous process that involves internal authorisations within the council, but also making an application to the magistrates court as well. So it's really, really important that we keep our officers up to date. So I've also covered in the report the fact that we've had a number of training sessions over the last few years, both internally organised ones and ones organised by external training providers. And I propose in there that we will be carrying out a further training session in 2021, again, to make sure that staff are aware of latest developments in this particular area. Other than that, I don't have anything else to update on this topic, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anybody has about the content of the report. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions, members? Julian Taylor, please.
Hi, thank you for that report. It's most important. In the appendix to this report, it says para 7, it talks about examples of surveillance which would not be directed surveillance. Yes. We've got a situation in one of the parish councils in the area in North Petherton where we've put in a comment about the lack of supervision on a planning development site where we feel that certain things have gone on which shouldn't be going on, and part of the development has happened without appropriate supervision. And I just wonder whether there's routine supervision is carried out as often as it should be. And it brings me back to the other questions. I hear of some other authorities are employing aerial supervision of planning developments, and I wonder whether that's covert or overt supervision.
I think I'm probably not the best person to answer that, Councillor Taylor. The reason being for that is obviously my involvement in surveillance would be where officers want to carry out covert surveillance. I wouldn't be the best person to answer in terms of what we do in the planning team, in terms of obviously keeping an eye on planning developments and compliance with planning conditions, that type of thing. So I can't really answer that in full. I know in terms of what did you just, I've forgotten what they're called.
Surveillance which not be directed surveillance.
Yeah, no.
Drones.
The drones, that's it. I couldn't think what they were called, sorry. In terms of drones, again, I wouldn't be qualified to comment on that. I know as an authority, we've looked at drones, not for that purpose, but we've looked at drones for keeping an eye on our own buildings and the maintenance of them. And we had a number of concerns about using drones. So I'm afraid that's something that I probably need to get an answer for you on. It's not one that I would be able to answer. In terms of, you know, carrying out surveillance on planning issues, you wouldn't normally do that covertly. You would normally, in planning terms, because you can obviously go and review a site quite easily, you can turn up, you know, you could potentially turn up unexpected. There wouldn't normally need to be any form of covert surveillance. So I don't believe that the council would do that. But as I say, I'm not a member of the planning team, so I probably am not the best person to answer that question.
May I come back, please, Chairman?
Yes, you can.
Yes. What about the question that arises, particularly in planning, where people who live adjacent to sites are conducting surveillance, and and are taking photographs? How does the council react to those? Do they consider that covert or overt surveillance?
Well, the same rules don't apply to members of the public. So we are a public body, and therefore we have to comply with the Human Rights Act. So that's why we need to obviously be concerned with RIPA and the legislation. Different rules apply to members of the public. So it's not something that we would get involved in.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions, members? Well, we need to note that no authorisations have been applied for under the RIPA in 2020 to date, and then to note the contents of the report. So we'll now move on to agenda item number 10, update on standards issues.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is my usual update on code of conduct complaints that have been made. Since I last reported to you, only one formal code of conduct complaint has been made in relation to a parish councillor. That complaint is still going through the process, so there is nothing to update you on at this stage. As I'm sure you'll appreciate, with COVID over a number of months, I'm not surprised that there have not been many complaints, because really at the end of the day, people's priorities have probably been in other areas. But now, well, some things are getting back more to a normal. I am certainly getting more phone calls and concerns being raised. So, you know, it may well be that we start to see a couple of complaints coming through the system, but I'll obviously keep you updated as matters progress.
Thank you for that. So, as a committee, we just need to note the update. And moving on then to agenda item number 11, Ombudsman's annual report for 2019-2020.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Again, this is another annual report that I bring before the committee. A very positive story this time, and in fact, you know, we generally have a positive story in terms of the number of complaints that we receive as an authority are very, very low. But as you'll see, the number of complaints this year, not this year, up until the end of March 2020, were considerably low, so they were half of the previous year, which is obviously a very positive story. Having said that, clearly the number of complaints is not necessarily a marker of you know, positivity or negativity, because at the end of the day, it is important that we have a process there for members of the public. So if they feel disgruntled with a decision that's been made, that they have somewhere that they can go. The most important thing for us is clearly how many of those complaints have been upheld, and as you will see, this year no complaints have been upheld by the local government ombudsman, which is clearly very, very positive. Bear with me, I'm having a bit of a problem opening up the actual report and therefore the table that I want to refer you to, so if you could bear with me a moment. I do apologise, Chairman. That's it. So as you will see, in terms of the number of complaints that we've had over the last 6 years, both this year and 2018 are the lowest number that we've held, and obviously we've broken down into categories where those complaints lie. Not of any surprise is the fact that the majority of the complaints relate to planning and development, and that is always the case. We always have a higher number of complaints in relation to planning and development, and that is because it does tend to be a more controversial area. In terms of the decisions made, you'll see in table B, I've already said that none of them have been upheld, but you'll see how those complaints have been dealt with. And you'll also see, really, for the last 3 years, we have not had any complaints upheld, which is clearly really, really positive. I would normally in this report include a breakdown of the numbers of complaints that have been had by other local authorities locally, so that I could do a comparison. Unfortunately, I was unable to get into the level of detail that I'm normally able to on the Ombudsman website. Now, it may be that they've just moved the information and I was unable to find it, but I will obviously have a look in further detail at that, and when I bring the report back next year, I would hope to be able to provide you with some comparative data, because I think it's really useful to see how we compare to our sort of nearest neighbours and local authorities of a similar size, so that we can judge whether the number of complaints are of a similar number. But I can confirm that when we compared last year, we certainly were in exactly the same ballpark as other local authorities in the area. They were all averaging between sort of 5 and 15. So I'm very comfortable that the number we've received are very comparable to local authorities of a similar size. That's all I have to update. Thank you, Chairman. Happy to answer any questions.
So are there any questions, please? Councillor Bruce, please. Have you got a question? Okay.
I can have one if you want.
No. I just got one saying yes. Can I? So I misunderstood that one. So I do apologise.
I do have a quick question, if that's possible. The report on the complaints received goes up to the end of March this year. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Any idea how we're faring so far this year, seeing as we've been through COVID and everything? I mean, I think personally the council's doing an excellent job handling everything, but
I don't know, because I only receive this on an annual basis, but obviously as monitoring officer I do tend to be involved in quite a number of the complaints that come in. I have an oversight of them, and I have to say I have not seen many complaints at all. But as I say, I'm not necessarily involved in all of them, so it's probably not fair of me to say that. But I would suspect there would have been a drop-off of complaints for certainly the first few months of COVID. So I would have thought it would definitely initially have seen a reduction in complaints going through the process. But as you say, you don't know whether it will generate some complaints about the process itself, you know, with COVID and how we've dealt with that situation itself. But I've certainly not seen any. So so we'll have to wait and see and see what the report comes out in March.
Fair enough. Thank you.
If there are no more questions, members, then I think we conclude today's business. And I would like to wish every one of you a happy Christmas, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and see you all in the new year, ready to start again. So thank you for that, and I'll see you next year.